And for those of you who may not have gathered that already, I'm Ron Sticka. I am the program director for the Symposium, which is actually a joint effort with several foundations, and we've got a wealth of speakers with knowledge in many areas. I'm also a director and president of the Kemp Sticka PTSD Music and Arts Foundation, which is just a little over a year old, so we formed legally, but it wasn't until about this time 1 year ago that we started with our efforts to look into new ways we might address what I think is a scourge on our nation and a serious problem, more serious maybe than most people realize and more vast than most people realize. Post-traumatic stress disorder. At least that's what it's called now. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the history. It's a condition that's been around forever, but in 1980, a group of those in the mental health industry got together. So we really need to have some common terms for conditions so it's more recognizable among each other what we're talking about, and for statistical purposes of keeping track. Is it an accurate designation? That's one of the things we're going to talk about today and report out. But our foundation has been formed primarily to look at issues as they relate to this condition. It's a trauma condition, trauma-related, how it impacts the brain, what can we do that maybe can achieve better results. It's my gauge based on my readings and experience that it's a pretty vast problem. My guess, and it's really just an educated guess, is that probably about 1 out of every 3 Americans probably suffers some level of trauma that is debilitating to what they do or has experienced that within a family unit or a close personal friendship. So it's a problem that everybody, I believe, can identify with. There's too much divisiveness in our country these days, and I would love to be in the forefront of a harmony movement, not a peace movement, but harmony, which necessarily involves and brings into it peace, but many other aspects so that people can get along with each other. I'll be talking later how I deal with children in schools and talk music theory. And one thing I point out to them is we have notes on the scale, lots of different notes. They have different sounds, different tones, and they work and interact with other notes. So they're different, but they come together in harmony. Although notes can come together in discord too, but the brain much prefers harmony to discord. So music is something you want to listen to and have that resolve your emotional state, whatever it may be. So in the spirit of our foundation motto, harmony with integrity, I'd like you to realize that the initials of that are HI, and I looked in the dictionary for hi. The only definition that's given is it's a greeting. There's no other definition for it. So what I want to do today is launch as part of our harmony movement that we recognize that hi stands for harmony with integrity. So now when you hear someone say hi, or when you say hi to someone else, think harmony with integrity, and that's how you're approaching someone. So at this point in time, to launch that part of this movement, I'd like everyone to turn to your neighbor, give them a big smile, say hi, and introduce yourself. All right, we have launched our program, and so at this time, I'd like to have Senator Peter Courtney stand and come forward. He is our Senate President in the fine state of Oregon. And he's going to have a few words to say, and leading to our keynote speaker, Senator Manning.
Thank you. I'm not part of the program. Once I heard you were doing this event, I came down to support my colleague, the Honorable Sergeant Major Senator James Manning, Jr. And to show you the kind of support, I didn't know where to park my car, so I parked across the street. I didn't know where to pay. Then I parked in front of the place here. So I've parked every place imaginable in downtown Eugene. But, because I'm from Salem, I also want you to know that I put on my tie, I put on a pair of shoes and socks, so I look like this, so I can look like him. So, because I knew that if I wasn't dressed appropriately, the Sergeant Major would talk to me. So literally, I dressed like a big boy just to be here. I'm not kidding you, because all this is coming off, almost, when I get back in my, when I get back in my car. But I did. I'm very proud of this, that this is even the clothing. Two thoughts. I want to thank you very much for holding the first annual PTSD Symposium, and you'll be very surprised to learn why. Last week I was in a little island somewhere talking to an individual whose wife was just once removed from me talking to my wife in a dinner, but it was a conference in Hawaii. And his wife all of a sudden said something about she's on medicine for depression. She had said it earlier in the day, and it stunned me because we were talking about other things. So I finally said to him, I said, Kevin, can I talk to you about your wife? And we got into the issue of mental illness. And he used a phrase, and this allows me to use the phrase for the first time this event. Now, maybe you're used to it, because I've been involved in the mental health issue in Salem in a lot of ways. When the time comes that we mainstream mental illness, when we mainstream mental illness, I'd never heard that phrase before, we will have really broken through. And that word mainstream is very significant to me because of years ago when we deinstitutionalized the Oregon State Hospital in Fairview and these things. But I never heard of the word mainstream. And this kind of event is helping us do that. So I want to thank you very much, because until we get to mainstreaming mental illness, we're going to continue to be fighting from behind in this area, whether it's this issue, depression, etc. And this little card here has all the different categories. Now, another reason I want to thank you very sincerely is that I was calling earlier this week for an event I'm going to have in my backyard. And one of the lobbyists, a fundraiser, said to me, I don't know how we got talking about how, and he said, Peter, have you ever thought of holding a town hall meeting on suicide? And I said, because I want to do a town hall meeting next week on, we got a huge water crisis in the city of Salem. That's my district, huge water crisis. And I was thinking of one on homelessness, but I said, no, I never thought of doing that. He says, well, you know, Woodburn High School, why don't you think about how about Woodburn High School? Woodburn High School is my district. And I am going to do that. But the reason is that individual had been talking to Senator Manning the day before down here, that lobbyist, and because I had talked about how I was going down there to support Senator Manning for this event. So here, this event has helped me think about doing an event not on the area of PTSD, it's the area of mental illness, depression, suicide, it's all there. And so without this event and my connection with Senator Manning, I'm not sure I would have ever had the conversation involving the area of suicide, which I'm going to get into in a town hall meeting in a few months up in Salem. So thank you for those who've organized this. Well, thank you. So thank you for those who have been here today and all the hard work you've put in for this first annual PTSD Symposium. You've helped mainstream mental illness. Thank you for being there first, and thank you for helping me think about a town hall meeting on suicide. This little event here today is just remarkable, and with that I will step aside and let something else remarkable to come forward. The Sergeant Major. Notice how I hesitate. You got to be dramatic here. Sergeant Major James Manning, Jr.
Mr. President, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come down there. Colonel, this is a great event. We've had some discussions about this. Your beautiful daughter, Kim, things that you shared with me about her life, and this is part of continuing on a recognition of the legacy that she has touched so many lives, and now we're here today to move forward to kind of understand, or not understand, but to dive deeper into post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide awareness and prevention. All of these things, as President Courtney had just mentioned, are alive and well, and mainstream about suicide awareness and stuff is very, very big. I did a little bit of research. Actually, when I was asked to come and speak, I had no idea that it was characterized that I was the keynote speaker. And so I thank you for that. I'm looking, I'm like, oh man, I have to really prepare for this. So I had prepared a 5-hour speech, and the colonel told me, no, you get 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay. So that made it really easy for me then. So all of this research, Colonel, that I did, I'm going to give that to you because that's really some good information there. Notice I even printed it out in color. And I just want to kind of get started a little bit about a few terms when we're talking about how we got here. Years ago in the military, first off, all of the veterans out there, put your hands up, please. If you are a family member of a veteran, please put your hands up. If you know a veteran, put your hands up. All right, now we got everybody here then. Thank you so much for that. So I was talking to my wife last night, and there were some terms that I was looking at, and first one that jumped out, I said, battle fatigue. You know, what is battle fatigue? And I started thinking about some of the research that I've done over the years about different wars and stuff, you know, World War I, II, Korean War, Vietnam War, all my Vietnam veterans out there, welcome home. Up to the current Gulf War era 1 and 2 that's still undergoing right now, the global war on terrorism, how those actually have changed the title from battle fatigue to shell shock to post-traumatic stress disorder. And that little tool that we have, Google Scholar, it comes out pretty handy. Sometimes the meaning of battle fatigue is a mental disorder caused by stress of active warfare, something that's also related to the constant bombardment of munitions around a person. Google also had defined shell shock, and I have these little glasses that I use. I call them my enhancers. So they make the letters and stuff look bigger. So I decided, why would I want to spend money on something like this when I can just increase the font? So I now use 20 font, so I don't have to put these on. So I'll put these over here now. In the future, please do not send me any writings or anything in 12 font or anything less than 20 font, because I'll have to have someone else read it, or I'll have to put these glasses on and look like I'm very educated when I'm just in fact trying to figure out what is that next letter there. So Google had defined shell shock as a psychological disturbance caused by prolonged exposure to active warfare, especially being under bombardment. Then I said, well, someone told me, said, well, before you get out there, you have to make sure that you quote a phrase, something that's, people are aware of. So I looked under the Mayo Clinic, and I think that everybody is familiar with the work that the Mayo Clinic has, and they have a definition of post-traumatic stress disorder. It says it's a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experienced or it is witnessed. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. Post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms may start within 1 month of a traumatic event, but sometimes symptoms may not appear until years after the event. These symptoms cause significant problems in social or work situations and relationships. They can also interfere with your ability to go about your normal daily tasks. PTSD symptoms are generally grouped into 4 types: intrusive memories, avoidance, negative changes in thinking and mood, and changes in physical or emotional reactions. Symptoms can vary over time and vary from person to person. I am reminded years ago, share something a little personal with you that kind of bring all of these terms and the findings from the Mayo Clinic that has hit me personally. Growing up, my dad, he joined or enlisted into the United States Army during World War II. He was about 16 years old, and he served over in Italy. And he shared a picture with me. It was him and three of his buddies. I was a young fellow at the time, and he told me that all three of them were dead. He saw them getting killed. So, you know, you're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They went out on a mission. There was 2,000 went out. Only 200 came back. My dad was wounded in action, MIA for a while. And one day, I had approached him. He was asleep. And I reached my hand out to shake him. And he jumped up and grabbed my hand. And he said, "No." I didn't understand what was going on. Till now, since I'm a lot older, have some research under my belt, thanks to the Colonel and this symposium, I understand. Post-traumatic stress disorder comes and goes. It's like a ghost that you can't get rid of. Some people are able to deal with it. My dad wasn't able to deal with it. Over time, he turned to alcohol. And alcohol took him out because that was the crutch, that was his escapism. So sometimes suicide is not just an act of one just using a weapon or some other object or pills to take their life. Sometimes it is a long-term process that erodes the body, erodes the mind, it affects the families. They turn violent, they have violent outbreaks and stuff. And we don't look at it like that. We just think that they're just mean people. We don't know what's going on the inside. We see that more and more often nowadays. But the unfortunate part about this is that the suicide rates have astronomically climbed higher, especially with veterans and even our youth in schools, brought on by traumatic experiences, being neglected, being treated differently, and they don't have anyone to turn to. I think what this program is designed to do is to help us come up with alternative solutions where we can provide that help to prevent people from going over the edge, whether it's recovering from drug addiction, whether it's recovering from a traumatic experience children are having in violent homes. All of these things will have an impact on children over time if we don't get out in front of it. As President Courtney says, this is a priority. This is a priority that I have for the Oregon State Senate. It's not a political issue. It's a human issue. It's a family issue. How this impact each and every one of us. Because to lose a life unnecessarily when we don't understand what's going on, it's a tragedy for everybody. So I can go on and on. I was just going to get started on this, but you know, I told you I had a 5-hour speech. The Colonel told me, no, you're not getting 5 hours, you got 10 minutes. I think that I've already been over my 10 minutes. No, I have not been over my 10 minutes. I got 1 minute left, okay. So, for those that didn't know, LaWanda, my wife, she's also my legislative assistant. She's my timekeeper. She does everything. Generally, when I get up, if they tell me that I got 3 minutes, she would go in the back and she would put a stopwatch on. So now I know that now she's telling me it's time to cut it off. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the Colonel. I do appreciate this. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Senator Manning. And the important thing, one of the important things of what you said is this is a human issue. This is something we can all work toward as a common cause to defeat PTSD and try to get everyone back to a normal state of mind. We got to find better ways. It's an issue which affects communities across our nation, and I have invited people to come and speak on behalf of the mayors of Eugene and Springfield. So at this time, I'm going to turn the podium over to John Ruiz. He's also a retired colonel, as am I, so he's got good perspective on this. I'd love to hear from John Ruiz about the issue at hand.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And I just want to talk a little bit about youth. In Fort Jay and Bethel school districts, over 1,200 students are homeless. And of them, over 300 of them are unaccompanied, which means that they are primarily couch surfing and only an incident away from going onto the street. And so trauma is a significant part of their life journey. Homeless youth are 18 times more likely to use crack cocaine than non-homeless youth. Runaway and homeless youth experience rape and assault rates 2 to 3 times higher than the general population of youth. Nearly 50% of homeless youth report mental health problems, and then more than 1/3 of homeless youth engage in survival sex. In some studies, up to 70% of runaway youth have been sexually abused, compared to 1 to 3% of the general youth population. Abuse and trauma are further compounded by survival sex and other victimization. 1 in 3 kids experience child abuse and neglect. And if a youth spends more than 14 consecutive nights on the street, there's a significant chance that they will become chronically homeless. But there is hope. There are 2 local organizations that are working really hard to address this particular issue. One is 90 by 30, which is out to reduce child abuse by 90% by 2030 in Lane County. And the 15th Night, which is a collaboration of organizations that have come together to figure out how to keep youth in school and off the streets. And both of these organizations have come together in a unique framework, which we call collective impact. And the purpose of collective impact really is to bring numbers of individuals and organizations and agencies together to address really complex, difficult issues like youth that are homeless. And a real important part of collective impact is for those to come together and really to express and to use their particular gift in that particular place on a particular focus. So for example, I think of it like a symphony. When you go to a symphony, all the various musicians that come together are able to play their instrument in a way that when it comes combined, you get a beautiful piece of music. And that's what really collective impact is about. It's how do we get the best out of a variety of organizations to come together, to focus together, to share, to work towards a common purpose, and in this case, youth and youth that are homeless. And so both for 90 by 30 and for the 15th Night, there are dozens of different groups that have come together. And so I think our learning today, the things that we share with each other today, the new things that we experience, really must be integrated into the work of others and can't just stand alone and try to be successful. They need to be integrated into the work. And the work today, this kind of work has application into so many different areas. We think often about veterans, we think about first responders, and we think about youth. Some of you may be familiar with this passage. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give all my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. We must listen and learn from each other. We must have compassion. We must extend kindness and grace. But most of all in our work, we must do so with love.
John Reese, thank you so much for those words. That was really helping set the tone. And for the city of Springfield, actually our fire chief for both Eugene and Springfield, but here speaking on behalf of Springfield, our fire chief, Joe Zaladic.
Good morning. Mayor Lumberg and City Manager Grimaldi send their regrets. I'm kind of thankful they were out of town today because this is something I have a lot of passion about, and I really want to take this opportunity to kind of talk about where we're doing within first responders of Eugene and Springfield that are, I think, going to change the trajectory of some of the health and well-being of the people that serve our communities every day. Something that it took me a few situations to recognize is that our first responders today respond to approximately 10 times the volume of calls that they did approximately 30 years ago. I went to a celebration of life for a very nice gentleman that I worked with, and he kept a log of each call that he went on. And so when they tallied the numbers of the calls that he'd been on during his career, I had realized that the mission creep and the busyness over the years, we were doing the calls in 2 or 3 years that he did in over a 30-year career. So when you see the repeated and exposure to trauma and the repeated, I would say, just volume of not being able to maybe reconcile all your feelings about an event before the next one comes, you see where the challenges are coming in the fire service and in first responders today. One of the things that is very telling, and I read a lot of trade journals and I try to stay up to speed on everything that's going on for the safety and well-being of all of our firefighters, is we have taken great attempts over the last 20 years to reduce what's called line of duty deaths out in the field where something happens unforeseeable and somebody dies as part of doing their duty. We've done a great job of doing that in the last 20 years, but only in the last 3 or 4 years did we recognize that although our line of duty deaths have gone below 100 a year nationwide, and there's 1 million firefighters, our suicides for first responders has well exceeded and now has almost doubled the line of duty deaths for those that are injured in the line of duty. So we know that there's an exchange of focus that we need to take to address to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of our responders, and we do a much better job. As people come into our organization, we try to prepare them, and what has changed for our focus is we talk about being, as part of our guiding principles, one of the most respected and resilient departments in the country as part of our goals. And I don't think we would have had this resiliency piece of this if it was even 5 years ago. And some things in our organization that changed is we did have a suicide in 2009 by a wonderful man named Brian Gordon that had everybody that kind of saw what was happening, each person had a piece of the puzzle that something wasn't quite right, but we didn't really have the training or the awareness to connect the dots that we needed to intervene. And so knowing that that was part of what happened and saying this is avoidable and never again will our organization be in a situation where our people don't ask, see something, say something, we started doing some training that increased our capacity to understand how to better support each other. A quick shout out, I see a Eugene police officer in the back. They've done a wonderful job of helping us with our critical incident stress debriefing, and as a team, we're doing a much better job of doing that. And I just wanted to thank you publicly for the work that your team helps us with whenever we have an event, and we're trying to get our teams, internal team, trained up to do some similar support. Maybe we can share those responsibilities one day. I see Dr. Leeds in the house today, and I just wanted to publicly thank Dr. Leeds for allowing us to start having conversations with our crews that are starting to connect them to their humanity so that they can address some of these huge issues that they have had and allow them to kind of reconcile them in a way where, and I think his description is, you have a backpack full of rocks, to shrink those rocks down to pebbles and eventually a grain of sand. You know, you can't really get rid of those things, and they are part of the character of what you have as a first responder, but what we're trying to do is eliminate the practice of, I have a few very close friends that were mentors that retired in a few years later, similar to Senator Manny's experience because of alcohol or abuse. They wound up passing just due to not having the ability to reconcile kind of what went on within their career. Things are starting to change now. We are looking to teach our first responders, as very young first responders, how to deal with their feelings and to talk about it as a crew. And I'll just give you some examples and some trends over the last even 10 years. 10 years ago, we would have just said, stuff it, this is part of the business, we know it's lousy, everybody goes through it, and just deal with it. We had an event 2 months ago where a crew experienced a very traumatic exposure to a very critical event, and for the first time in my career, our supervisors went out there, they talked with the crews, they allowed them to talk with each other, they took them offline, they then had do some activities of bouncing off how they're feeling about it, they actually talked it through, sent a couple of them home that wanted to just go home and hug their family and hug their kids. So we're making progress, and we need to institutionalize that as part of our behavior. And I was so proud of our organization that we took the steps of trying to support the people that are doing this response so they can have a 30-year career and still afterwards have a very productive life that includes, you know, being able to love and care for the people around them. So I'm very proud of where we're going. We have a lot of work to do in this area and a lot of catching up to do for some of the people that already have some backpacks that have a lot of rocks in them. I am so thankful for having this opportunity as providing leadership to help with that. And you know, if you told me 5 years ago that I was going to, at the recruit graduation, have discussions with them and their family about what it's going to be like and how to feel supported, it wouldn't have been possible, and it wouldn't have been possible without Dr. Leeds and providing us some of the vision of the kind of courage that it takes to have these discussions. My experience is, I did have a brother experienced suicide from a brother in 2002, and I kind of, it did change the trajectory of how I felt about my family and life, but it allowed me also to understand that we need to take action so that this doesn't impact those that in an avoidable way. And so you should have seen the look on the crew's face in the back of the room when at graduation, I quoted Hamlet when I told these new recruits that they need to find a way to connect themselves to their humanity, and they may not be able to say it here, but they can say it here and say it here. And so when they're kneeling next to somebody that has passed or is unable to do anything for, say something kind within your heart, something like, "Good night, sweet prince or princess. In flights of angels, sing thee to thy rest." And if you can't say it out loud, you can say it inside, and it provides some closure. But I said, one day, you're going to have the courage to say that out loud, and it's going to make you feel better. It's going to make your crew feel better. The family that's earshot is going to hear this, and everybody on scene is going to know that this person transitioned with respect, and it helps you with the first part of your journey of creating some closure that's going to be healthy and allowing you to keep that backpack shrunk down to size. So with that, I just wanted to welcome you all here today. I'm really looking forward to how this progresses, and just thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.